Yes, welcome back to the Magic Sponge podcast, a miracle cure for all your rugby league injury issues. I'm Brien. I'm the guy behind NRL Physio, all the content you see on social media. My co-host, James, he's a physio. Massive footy nuff, mate. It's a bit of a sad Sunday. I think the less we talk about the footy, the better in respect to your team and my team's performance today. So maybe we just stick purely to the injuries and Origin today because, yeah, it wasn't a good one.
We are a couple of losers speaking together on a Sunday night, Brian, aren't we? Unfortunately, not as embarrassing for you as it is for me, getting absolutely dusted by the Gold Coast up at Suncorp there. So that wasn't great to see. But anyway, we move forward and we look forward to Origin selections. And boy, oh boy, has there been some interest and haven't released theirs, I don't think, as it stands right now. But there's a few interesting selections there by the sound of things. But New South Wales, whole host of changes there. So Madge has got the broom out and he's looking to put his stamp on that team. It's pretty interesting, hey?
Mate, we've got a good discussion on it later because I'm sure people are really hungry to hear our thoughts as two proud Queenslanders on what New South Wales have done right or wrong, or Queensland's done right or wrong. But yeah, definitely not the two squads I expected either side to pick, which is that always makes it interesting, right? Is that it's not the cookie cutter approach. Which will it makes Origin even more fun, I think, which is good. But let's get into it, guys. Look, we're on YouTube now, so head on over there, subscribe, review, thumbs up if you're watching us on YouTube. Hey, and thanks for tuning in. It seems to be growing all the time, which is great. As always, this is where you get all your injury analysis in the NRL. We cover the in-game injuries, big injury news, rehab news from the week, loop it all back to likely recovery time, on-field performance, and the big one is SuperCoach and Fantasy scoring. If you like what you're getting here, head on over patreon.com/NRL Physio. We've got the chat there where we discuss any injuries going through. I spoke about what I thought about the Nicho Hynes, injury at the time and whether it was a good idea for him to get picked for Origin on the go. We've got the most detailed casualty ward on the internet. I think there's about 6,000 or 7,000 words covering every single injured player. And this season, there's been so many big players injured. I've got all those guys covered in depth. So your Nathan Cleary, your Tom Trbojevic, these kind of guys, Kalen Ponga, he's going to be back around round 19, 20. What are my expectations for him? Those kind of things. It's all there, covered in depth, past performances. So how other players have performed with those injuries in the past, these kind of things. So yeah, head on over patreon.com/NRL Physio. But otherwise, yeah, let's get to those injuries from round 12.
I don't know exactly what he's done. I would have thought it was an ankle, but I'm just guessing.
He shouldn't be out for a long period of time. I'm no doctor. We have to wait for the scans, obviously, but that'd be more positive than negative.
Round 12's done and dusted, Brian, for the NRL. So we're going to go straight into the HIAs as we do every week. Two names on the list tonight are Jack Wighton and Matt Eisenhuth. So they're going to go through the protocols. Probably not too much else to add from that point of view, Brian. So what we're going to do is go straight ahead into the Bulldogs v Dragons. Out of this game, Jack Bird with a fairly decent inversion ankle injury there, and Hame Sele with a shoulder concern. On Jack Bird, Brian, I think he's been ruled out of fracture territory, hasn't he? So it's just a high-grade ankle sprain is what we're probably looking at.
Yeah, mate, I think I said at the time, and I say it, every time we get one of these injuries, I'm like, bark's worse than bite usually, so it often looks worse than it is. I did caveat this one by saying that a fracture was definitely on the table with how violently it seemed to roll. It was not only traumatic, but yeah, I mean, you're heading towards like dislocation kind of, and you very rarely see an ankle dislocate when it rolls that way. But yeah, he was getting pretty close. So thankfully, no fracture there. I'd be surprised if he needs surgery. They were talking syndesmosis at one point, and it is rare for a syndesmosis injury to happen when the foot rolls that way, but it can happen if it rolls far enough, which for Birds it pretty much did. So he potentially needs surgery there, but we haven't heard anything at this stage. I would be thinking that he'd more be looking around that 3 to 5 week kind of range with just a really high grade lateral ankle sprain, which we see often. So complete ligament tears, but generally, 3 to 5 weeks, they come back and they come back pretty well. So provided there's no high ankle syndesmosis injury there, and it's only that lateral ankle, and we'll talk about the difference between high and low ankle sprains later in one of the questions. But hopefully just the lateral ankle. Hame Sele, he fractured his shoulder, so he'll be at least, I think he needs surgery, so he'll be at least 6 weeks. It'd be interesting to see which part of the shoulder that is. I'm assuming it's his AC joint potentially, but they didn't really clarify. So yeah, at least 6 weeks, but it could be 10 to 12 if it's any part of the actual labrum or anything like that. So which is the ball and socket joint part of the shoulder. So be interesting to see what comes out of that. But yeah, both several weeks out.
It's interesting, Brian, from that game, what the Bulldogs look like when they actually pick a 7 as well, isn't it? Amazing how coaching just befuddles the mind, and then all of a sudden they pick this guy who can play halfback, and they look like a completely different unit, the Bulldogs, don't they? They were flying the other night. So, next game was the Cowboys versus the Tigers. The only injury we've got to report out of this one was Isaiah Papali'i with that probably high-grade ankle syndesmosis injury in the Val Holmes tackle that was cited, but obviously not costing Val any suspension there, even though we spent time in the sin bin. What are we sort of thinking there recovery-wise, Brian? Have they confirmed it's going to be syndesmosis surgery for Isaiah Papali'i? I can't remember if it was or not.
No, not confirmed yet, but I think that's your assumption until proven otherwise. You saw the mechanism, you saw how Val's pretty much his whole body weight came down on Papali'i there. So yeah, I think until proven otherwise, you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks syndesmosis surgery for any Fainu owners or non-owners. I think he's looking like a great prospect now, sort of out on that edge. I think to the hip drop, I had a few people ask about the hip drop and thoughts on, your Val Holmes versus your Latrell and the Clemmer and then Offengowie ones. The biggest thing is that, I think we always say not every hip drop is created equal, and there's those mitigating factors. And in Val's, there was a massive mitigating factor in that he did lose his feet, but as he lost his feet, he was sort of facing Papali'i, but then it was the collision. I think it was Dearden coming across actually hit him and turned him. So Val hasn't chosen, hasn't made a decision to turn. There's that mitigating factor of contact from somebody else causing that turn and drop. Because before that, I think he would have just slid straight down the back of Papali'i without that collision. So that's a mitigating factor. So I understand why that's less. It was probably similar for Latrell in that his was a few more mitigating factors as well, but especially the Clemmer and then the Offengowie one. I think the Offengowie one just illustrates everybody looks at that and goes and knows that that's a more dangerous tackle. It's a more careless technique. And the fact that his butt hit the ground microseconds before he then rolled up onto the ankle, it just doesn't. I know that's the NRL's, seems to be the thing they focus on. But then they've also brought in this dangerous contact thing right now where even if it isn't a hip drop, if it's dangerous contact where they're falling on the legs, they're still charging them anyway. So I think the whole direct contact thing, I feel like I more than any time know a hip drop when I see it. And yeah, the Offengowie one was a hip drop because he hit, he turned and he dropped. The fact that he just hit the ground moments before, that doesn't absolve it from being a hip drop. For me, it obviously does for the NRL, but I think it's still, it's that those ones are still probably the more dangerous ones for me. I don't know, James. I'm a bit of a hip drop fiend in that I love sort of analysing those things. You're probably not as deep into it as me, but yeah, I felt that the Val one, there was probably more mitigating factors than anything. I don't know about you.
Yeah, probably did. It was one of those ones as well. I think the one mitigating factor for me, or maybe it's not really a mitigating factor, it's just one thing that I look at. It's almost the speed that the ball carrier is running with as well. And I think the slower they're going, if your target is there or the contract ends up there, that's just worse because you've got options to change. You've got choices to make there. Whereas sometimes when people are going flat stick and, sometimes it's a try scoring situation similar to what Val was, I think sometimes it can end up like that where there may be, I guess, less intent, I suppose, if you want to use that word. But yeah, it's a whole variety of factors go into it. But I think you're pretty bang on the money there for those things that you just mentioned before. Manly versus the Storm was the next game, Brian. So pre-game, Tolutau Koula, who was a popular trade-in, I suppose, option this week when he got named at fullback. He was ruled out pre-game with an AC joint injury, and then Will Warbrick from the Storm with a groin injury there as well. I guess the Storm have the week 13 bye. He's probably a chance for round 14, would you say, Brian?
Yeah, I think they haven't clarified whether it's minor, moderate, but it didn't look like he was still running with it. So it wasn't like the Cameron Munster, where he went down in all sorts of problems. So I'd be surprised if it's a high grade one. And with those minor groin strains, are usually they refer to them as day to day, so they can improve quite significantly day to day, even though it can kind of linger around a little bit. So you can get to 90%, be feeling pretty good, and then it can go back to 60%. So, yeah, I'd say he's a good chance for post-bye unless we hear it's worse than expected. The Koula one, I think, we spoke about it last week in that, especially with those loop arounds, those sweep plays with the fullbacks, they just seem to get lit up every now and then. Kalen Ponga had that high-grade AC joint injury late last year from that exact play. Koula had the same thing here. They haven't stipulated whether what the grade is, but you're assuming grade 2 to 3 if he had to miss this week, because grade 1s they usually needle them up and handle them pretty well. Moving forward, I mean, I think they play both round 16 and 19, the Seagulls, from memory. So from a Supercoach perspective, I mean, I'll throw to you in a second as to whether you think he's a buy. The fact that he had this week off and he's got next week off makes me a lot more confident in his sort of ability to avoid aggravation moving forward. I think that gives it some time to settle down because it is just a pain management thing. The only thing I would say is that for someone like this, once again, as a fullback, that sweep play, if they get hit, they're not getting hit lightly. It's not like the winger is flying in. He's not hitting a stationary defender, which a lot of forwards who play through these things are. They're running into a brick wall, whereas he's running into a brick wall that's running towards him. So it does mean that, he could get lit up and aggravate that shoulder probably a little bit more than, say, a forward could. But where are you at with, because I think, and we'll talk about whether Tommy Turbo will come back at centre later, but how are you approaching Koula as a buy sort of post round 14?
It's not really been on my radar, to be honest. I think I've got better ideas at fullback, and I've probably got better ideas at centre wing. The argument you can make is his work rate and his involvement was really good against the Broncos when he did play fullback there the week before. And I think the attacking stats will come there. He looks likely enough against the Broncos there. I didn't think he looked too bad. So he's probably one to watch. I think you could make an argument for it. He's probably not in mine, but I wouldn't sort of look at it as the worst trade in the world. Would he be someone on your radar, do you think, Brian?
I'm pretty stacked in the centres. My team isn't great elsewhere, but I've loaded up on the centres. So he's pretty cheap. I think he's under 500k. So if he's named again at fullback, sort of in round 14, I'll definitely give him a look. But I've just got a lot of guys in my centres and my fullbacks that I just I'd kind of be it'd be you'd get money from it, but I'm like, it's a sideways trade kind of thing. So I think if you're upgrading, if you've seen a guy like a bottom price guy, you've seen him gain 200, 300 grand, and you're looking to sort of move them on, maybe to another mid-range, I reckon he's a good option. But I would find it hard to downgrade a Zach Lomax to him, for example, even though Lomax is picked for Origin. That'd be a tough one to swallow, I reckon.
Yeah, I think the other player from Manly there who's probably more fantasy relevant is Tommy Tolutau at the moment, Brian. He's been looking at the absolute business, and I think his arrow is trending right up, and we spoke about him extensively pre-season, but it looks like the stars are aligning there for Tommy Tolutau, so long may it stay is all I'll say from this corner on the Magic Sponge. Raiders versus Roosters was the next game. Connor Watson, throat injury pre-game rule out. This was a bit of a bummer for Connor Watson because the drums were sounding for his name for Origin. In terms of talking to a few other people, a few journos, they were sort of saying Connor Watson was well in the mix of being a bench selection here. So that's awful timing for him. That might be a sliding doors moment where we look back and go, bloody hell, what a bad time to get injured, probably at training, I think is what it sounded like. And then from this game, so Egan Butcher with a knee injury, the mechanism there didn't look great. And then Sam Walker was a knee concern, and Brandon Smith with He was ruled out with something or other there, Brian, nausea or illness or something along those lines too. I didn't have much more info than that, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I just more mentioned because he left early, and then I had some little whispers that he was still feeling nauseous post game. So whether that's like a sickness thing, whether it's a concussion thing, just worth keeping an eye on with Brandon Smith there, because he was still getting those symptoms post. Sammy Walker. So I kind of came into this game after Egan Butcher had suffered his knee injury. So I kind of came to a whole bunch of, like Sammy Walker's injured his knee, Egan Butcher's injured his knee, and was kind of checking it. The fact that Sammy Walker was still out there, like, I was very grateful for, because to be honest, when I went back and checked it, I was like, oh man, he's copped a knock to the knee. That's his ACL knee. And when I say the ACL knee, he suffered a partial ACL tear in that knee last year. He's got it strapped. He's had it strapped the entire year. We know that up to 30% of those partial ACL tears then progress on to full ACL tears at some point in a player's career. So like just seeing that it was his, like I went back and checked the mechanism and saw he was clutching at a knee. That freaked me out a bit, but yeah, thankfully he was still out there. So that gave me confidence. I went back and really slowed down the mechanism. I think it was just knee to knee contact is what it looked like. So yeah, just like effectively a bone bruise or a cork or something like that, because I mean, he lit it up for the rest of the game. So he should be all good. Egan Butcher, there's one where coming in late, like I came in late and effectively the Roosters on-field medical stuff had cleared him of an ACL injury. Lara Pitt was saying, yep, they've cleared him. They don't think it's an ACL. I went and looked at the mechanism and I was like, are we talking about the same person here? Because that mechanism could not have been more textbook ACL. The only thing was the video wasn't, it was a wide shot. So you couldn't see whether that knee shifted very clearly as he stepped. But I thought I could see it there, but non-contact direction change. It just looked horrible. And then I think it was pretty much confirmed for me when the initial report was, we've cleared it. The hands-on tests are fine. And then he kind of went off, got it assessed in the sheds, and then he's come back out, and the report from Lara Pitt was now the Roosters aren't willing to rule anything out. For me, if you go from, the ACL's fine to now we're not willing to rule anything out, I'm like, they've performed those hands-on tests again and gone, the ACL's not there. I'm like, I'm not saying that is what's happened, but in my mind, I was like, that's what's happened. So unfortunately, it sounds like, ACL injury for Butcher, which would be 12 months out, which would be, a real big blow to him, because I think he's, and he was another one who, when they didn't sign Fifita and then Crichton's up in the air, he's a really important piece for their forward pack, I think, moving forward. And then Connor Watson with the throat. I just think this is interesting because I had a lot of people asking, how long, what are the implications? The thing you have to consider with a throat fracture is it's not like, we just have to wait for that bone to heal and it's okay. Like throat fractures affect your airway. And the important thing here, and we'll go to worst case. I'm not saying this is what it is, but I'm just showing you worst case. A case like Rory Kostjason. So Rory Kostjason, great player in his own right. He got a throat fracture. They kind of said, it's a pretty nasty one. You're probably looking at 6 to 8 weeks. So he waited for it to heal. It healed, but he couldn't get enough air into his lungs. Like it literally affected his throat that much that he was like, I'm just not fit anymore. Like I cannot run and run and run like I used to because I'm not effectively getting air down into my lungs. And that is the component that makes this a little bit more unpredictable. So they've said 3 to 4 weeks. He's missed. Connor Watson has had a throat injury in the past and missed 3 to 4 weeks. So they're obviously pretty confident it's kind of in the same realm. But I just think people need to be aware that throat injuries like this affect the airways. It's not just like wait for this cartilage to heal. It's like, we have to make sure that you can function, like via getting air into your lungs so that you can go out there and, play your full minutes, however long Connor Watson is required to play. So I don't know if you remember the Rory Kostjason one, James, but that was one that immediately sprung to mind.
Yeah, Roy Cross-Jason was one in Andrew Fifita, obviously the other. Darren Lockie's probably the most famous, isn't he, where he sort of changed his voice quite considerably after his throat injury. And I did see footage of Connor Watson in one of the I think it was one of the presses or one of the promos, I think, for Indigenous round. And he sounded okay, actually. It didn't sound like it sort of had affected him too much. Whether that was pre or post injury, I don't know. But he looked all right in one of the promo videos I think the NRL was running where they're all down at somewhere in the eastern suburbs there, I think, from memory, to run things through. So hopefully we've kind of Watson's on the side of less severe there, and he can be back sniffing around for a New South Wales Origin jersey because he's been immense this year. He's been such good nick for the Roosters. Sharks v Panthers, big names here, Brian. So Nicho Hynes ruled it in that game after HIA, but also reported by the team as a calf concern that tightened up, and I think they didn't want to risk him when they were already down 28 blot at that point. So that's a bit of an interesting situation. From the Panthers, Liam Martin and Jack Cole are reported as hamstring injuries. Liam Martin got named in the Blue squad today, so that'll be one to watch for them. And then probably just giving us a little update on Nathan Cleary, where he's at from a hamstring point of view, Brian, because he's already missing for, it's been 3 weeks now or 2 weeks? I can't remember, actually. Is it 3?
So he's missed 2 games. I think this is his
Two
second
games,
game
yeah.
because I think Jack Cole has, potentially had 2 games out, 2 games where he's played.
Yeah.
The interesting
Yeah.
thing with this is the Panthers, which they do every now and then. I don't think every week, but they released a video with one of their physios, sort of like detailing where all their injured players are at, which is really great. Like I love it when clubs do that, and they said that Cleary, interestingly, is still not pain-free. Like, effectively, they said, we're still trying to get him pain-free just in, his strength work and things like that. That's significant. Like, we're now 2 weeks post and he's still not pain-free. I think even I kind of had a feeling early. I was like, oh, is it not as bad as they're saying? Because they initially said 8 weeks. And I was thinking, are they just kind of put 8 weeks and he's actually going to be a bit better than that and it'll be 4 to 6? But they've said 8 to kind of not put pressure on him. But to be 2 weeks down the track and not be pain-free yet, still have to work through all your strength work, all your return to run, your sprinting work, your fitness work. Yeah, like I would be shocked if it's any sooner than that 8 weeks, unless he really starts to ramp up and kill it. So I just found that little tidbit, which I think probably goes through the keeper with a lot of people who might have watched the video. For me, I go, okay, it's definitely a pretty significant hammy issue that he's dealing with there. So I think anybody hoping for him to come back earlier, whether you're a fantasy, a classic or a draft person, I've got Cleary in a few drafts, and I straight away was like, okay. I think, in other words, I think Brad Schneider also too with Jack Cole with this hamstring issue, like Brad Schneider's not a bad pickup in a draft setting potentially, purely because I think you're going to get a good chunk of Brad Schneider before Cleary can come back is kind of how I approached it. On to Liam Martin and Jack Cole. Jack Cole, will obviously have scans on the hamstring. He'd be unlikely for next week. And then Liam Martin, the scans have come back and said no structural damage, but it just tightened up. I think, we'll talk about him and Nicho kind of hand in hand because they've both had scans that both come back clear. The one that concerns me more is Nicho, pretty obviously because of that recent history. Like this is the second time that calf has bothered him. He missed a couple of weeks ago with the calf injury. He's had a history of calf injuries in his past. Last year, he missed the start of the season with the calf as well. So for me, I was pretty shocked from a Michael Maguire standpoint that they picked Nicho, purely because he's kind of been pretty vocal, Madge, about like guys needing to be fit from the start of the week and from the get-go. And I just don't think that's going to be the case with Nicho if something like just going off for a HIA has caused his calf to seize up. If that's all it is, and I assume if they picked him, that's all it is. That's look, calves can linger, and they're known for that, but that's a pretty clear sign that he's not close to 100% with that calf, and not close to 100%, needing to form new combos over the next 10 days with a lot of guys that he's never played with extensively before. They have named McInnes at 13, so that'll help a little bit, but I was surprised. I think it probably speaks to the lack of options that they had there in terms of a true halfback. I think, you got Moses, Reynolds, Cleary, like all these kind of guys that, just not available. So, I think that was probably the one that surprised me the most. in terms of moving forward, like it was even something for me where, and it's blasphemy to ever not own both Nicho and Cleary in the halves, but I could see it as a real point of difference move selling Nicho, because I just think with this calf issue here now, and he's playing Origin, he either plays Origin and doesn't back up, or he plays Origin. He either plays Origin and doesn't back up, or he doesn't play Origin and he probably doesn't back up anyway because his calf's no good regardless. So it's a lot of coin. There's not like you go down to like a Sammy Walker maybe if you don't own Sammy. I just think it definitely, I don't mind it as a point of difference move. I've used a shitload of trades, so I definitely can't do it. But James, I wanted to throw that one out there to you. A, sort of what are you thinking about Nicho for Origin? And B, how would you approach him from a SuperCoach, a particularly classic standpoint?
First answer to the first question, Brian, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on just to get back into that zone there. It was interesting that there was the HIA and then, the calf tightened up, so we didn't put him back out there or not. I didn't hear explicitly, did he pass the HIA? Was that sort of given? That was mentioned,
Yes,
okay.
so they
Part of me
said
was
that he
like,
passed, yeah.
okay, yeah. So my thinking would be maybe he didn't pass, and maybe the calf is a big old smokescreen there that New South Wales is just trying to do a wool pull over our Queensland eyes, and I'm not falling for it, Brian. I'm just not having it. I'm
well,
sort of
mate, look,
suspicious
I did kind of preempt that by putting the video up of him trying to get up after getting kneed in the head pretty forcefully. And I will remind, look, it was term category 2, and that's by the independent doctor. So obviously no suggestions of untoward, silly buggers going on. But yeah, like he struggled to get back up to his feet.
Yeah.
He seemed to stumble, and loss of balance or motor incoordination is a category 1 sign. So I just put that video up and said, yeah, I assume the calf must have tightened up as he
Very
hopped up to play the
interesting.
ball. Yeah.
Very interesting, Brian. So that's probably the first thing. So maybe, it's hard because it's a lingering calf issue. It's sort of tightening up on him. It might make him week to week. It sounds like they're managing his training loads. I think Fitzgibbon made comment of such, and I think they made mention that he would need to manage it during Origin camp as well. So there's a bit to juggle on there, whether it's, Cat 1 signs and HIA, whether it's calf, what are we doing with there? Who knows? In terms of SuperCoach stuff, it's a very, very good question. One that I hadn't even considered because without hearing it's a definitive calf re-injury, I'm just going to roll the dice and keep him in my team because I don't have the trades to burn him in and burn him out. If you did have a fair few up your sleeve, I guess who would you go to? I guess Jerome Hughes has got a reasonable run upcoming after round 14. I suppose Sammy Walker covers 13 and 16. So you get a few good weeks out of Sam Walker there. At 7, Dylan Brown's now dual eligible as well. You think he might be worth a shake when Moses might be imminently back as well. It still doesn't make you feel real good not having Nicho on your side, though. I wouldn't be enormously keen myself. Sharks are also they're like red hot at the moment. So another one, like if you've got like the best SuperCoach player statistically over the last couple of years, say all bar Cleary, at a position that's not that deep and a team that's flying, I wouldn't be majorly inclined to move him on personally, but he's worth close to $1 million. He's going to drop a lot of cash now with the 2 rolling through his average. So, you could hold on to him. He's probably going to burn about, probably over 200, 250, isn't he really? Like by the time his 2 rolls through. So if you don't have him, you can probably look at getting him in. I guess the option is, do you trade him out, trade him back in at a discount with someone else on an upswing? So it could be a pretty reasonable play there. Be interesting, Brian. I don't know. You'd have to have big balls to do it, but I'd back you if you really wanted to make that play and come from the clouds to shoot up the rankings there. It might be a good play.
Mate, if you gave me another 10 trades, I'd do it, to be honest. If I think I've got like 20 trades or something absolutely ridiculous left. If I had 30 trades or if I didn't have too many Roosters, I'd get Sammy Walker in. Because once again, you're not going to have, I don't think, I can almost guarantee you're not going to have Nicho for round 14. I just can't see how they'd back him up after that. And then you're probably not going to have him for round 17 either. And you're not going to have him for round 16 because he's either going to be playing Origin more than likely, or I'm not even sure, do the Sharks play round 16? But either way, effectively, you're probably looking at round 15 between now and, so what's that? We're round 12. So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So over the next 6 weeks, you're probably going to have, or next 5 weeks, you're going to have one game out of him. I reckon, which, yeah, that's pretty full on. So like, I wouldn't be against selling him, to be honest. This is the way I'm approaching it. I think one game out of 5, if you've got the trades. I don't have the trades, so like the whole moving him in and out would just ruin, like it's just trades I don't need to spend. But I reckon if you've got like 26 plus trades, I'd be making the move personally, because I think, as you say, the weeks that he plays, but like it's potentially, like there's a very good chance it's only one in the next 5, which that's pretty significant.
Yeah, especially with that much coin sitting on your sideline. It's a good point to make, Brian. If I only didn't burn every trade every week, I'd be in a much better position, and I wouldn't be ruining these sort of things that come up mid-years, prime opportunities.
We should
Bunnies
just use
versus
one of
Eels
our
was the next
boosts,
one.
mate. One of our remaining boosts.
If I had one of them after round 8, I would have been doing well. But they're long gone, Brian. I've even forgotten about them. Didn't even have them, as far as I'm concerned. Rabbitohs versus Eels. Sorry, we'll move on to the next one. So 2 pre-game rule-outs here. Cody Walker with calf injury. Will Penisini with an infection there. We're not sort of looking at extended time frame for Cody, I don't believe, Brian, but age is a factor there. Calf injury recurring there for Cody. I can't think of too many recurring calf injuries for Cody. Does he have a history there as well?
He's had a couple, but apparently this is on the lower end. They said he was even available for Origin selection if needed. So, just something to keep an eye on. He's obviously got the bye week now. So, I think moving forward, you probably have a little bit of hesitance with him just because of his age. But other than that, nothing too much. I think these last 3 games will be able to roll through pretty quickly. There's nothing too much going on. Will Penisini with the infection, it's more than likely that he'll be back next week. But once again, with infections, the medical side of things, it can be a little bit unpredictable.
Yeah, Broncos Titans was the next one. Kotoni Staggs was a rib fracture pre-game rule out, and Jojo Fifita with a pec injury there. Brian, any updates there?
Fifita, minor pec injury. He's expected back after the bye. And Kotoni Staggs was another one where he wanted to play and the Broncos kind of ruled him out. Maybe they could have used him today potentially and pushed him through the pain. He'll be back. Do they play this week? 13?
No, they don't play 13, no.
So, he'll be back round 14 by the sounds of things, and just, a risk of aggravation moving forward, but nothing. It is a fracture, so, it gives you a little bit more, like, healing time, but, nothing too crazy.
Last one was Ray Stone, sort of an upper limb injury here, Brian. I don't have more detail than that. Any updates?
Mate, I was watching the game, and I'll admit I haven't gone back and reviewed the mechanism because I was watching this more from a fan perspective than an NRL Physio, analysis perspective by all means. But he got this blow in this tackle in the first half, and I think it was his elbow, but it could have even been his shoulder. I reckon he's dislocated one of them, kind of just like rolled the shoulder around, flexed the elbow a couple of times, and it's kind of like he looked gone for all money. Rolled it around, flexed the elbow, and then went, yep, okay, and just kept playing like absolute maniac.
He's such a gun.
Like, he's just mental.
He's good.
So, I haven't reviewed it, I will say, but just wanted to shout out the great man because, boy, oh boy, he just pushes through some stuff.
Mate, when the boys call him Stone Cold, I just get up and about. It's just the best nickname going in the comp when he's got the Stone Cold haircut cut in there, Brian. It's epic. Righto, that's a wrap up from round 12, Brian. We're going to go into the Patreon questions now. As we always say, patreon.com/NRL Physio. To get the updates, to get in the chat, to get these questions answered of a weekly, that's where you've got to go to give your hard-earned money to Brian there to sign up on Patreon. First question is about Anthony Seibold and Tom Trbojevic. So there was a little bit of whisper from Seibold here about Tommy Turbo playing centre. He's always sort of poo-pooed that idea in the past, Brian. So would that decrease his risk of hamstring injury? If so, would you try and buy Tolutau Koula in draft if Turbo was going to play centre? It's a bit of a multifaceted question there about Turbo going to the centres.
Yeah, I found this chat interesting because Journo kind of peppered Seibold with what's the plan with Turbo moving forward. And in the past, as you said, when he's been asked that question, it's been like, no, Tom's our fullback. His best position's fullback. No considerations. Whereas this discussion was very much like, we'll see how Tolu's going at fullback. We'll see how Tommy's feeling. It was just a lot more open and a bit more wishy-washy. So, like, we've always spoken about it in the past that I kind of feel like when we've discussed it, we've been like, if you can't get him to a point where he's fit enough to play fullback, then what are you doing? Putting him out at center? Because it's like, well, you know, you're paying him as much as you're paying him. You work on getting him fit and getting him to a point where he's going to be okay to play fullback. But I think like anyone, it's got to be, it's wearing on Manly, obviously. It's wearing on Turbo, and it's wearing on me a little bit in terms of like how I would view, you know, his approach moving forward. It's something like I've put the numbers down here in the notes. So at fullback in general, I think so. It's since 2018 to 2023. Fullbacks average about 48 injuries per 1,000 hours, whereas centers average 41 injuries per 1,000 hours. So it's not a massive difference. Like, that's probably not statistically significant enough. But the interesting part is that fullbacks, of those 48 injuries, 20% are non-contact injuries, which is what a hamstring injury usually is. Whereas with centers, only 10% of that. Of those are non-contact injuries. So I don't have the split on hamstrings, unfortunately. My access and my ability to collect data and not do this full time is there. So I don't have like the split of fullback to center hamstring injuries, but you would assume that probably means that fullbacks do suffer hamstring injuries at slightly higher rate than centers. And it would make sense from a perspective of fullbacks have to put a lot more miles through their legs. Hamstrings can be related to fatigue in terms of, you know, muscular fatigue over a game. Kilometers through the legs create that. In terms of moving forward, I still believe with him, you just have to figure out how to get him at fullback and how to play him at fullback, because there hasn't been a player in the history of the game where they've had to go, oh yeah, look, we've got to retire because, you know, your hammies aren't good enough. You know, like there just hasn't been, certainly not at his level anyway, in terms of like his importance to the team and stuff like that. So I just feel like that's still the overall thing to aim for. But I do see validity, especially if Koula is killing it at fullback, to kind of ease him back in via centers, just for his confidence more than anything else. I think with how many he's had now, in terms of, you know, would you try and buy Koula and draft? I'll throw to you as our super coach expert, mate. How would you approach Turbo's return, center versus fullback? And then what do you reckon about Koula being a buy?
Turbo at centers, like I always used to rag on the idea, but I think with Manly situation, they've got Koula and Garrick who could probably capably play that spot. And then if they can get into the final sort of sniff and get in that scenario, then maybe Tom becomes your fullback then, and you could make a charge from, you know, 4 through 8 or something like that. I just wonder if, just with the makeup of their team, they're better suited to navigate that than other clubs, because not a lot of other clubs have, you know, a lot of other clubs have fullback options, but they're not as viable as Tolutau Koula or Ruben Garrick. So I think Manly are probably one of the few teams you could make an argument and say, well, if we can just get games out of Turbo at centre, it's better than getting no games at all. And we're probably, you know, with his ability to roam around and play, you know, with freedom, within a game plan, then maybe that's a better way to getting some wins on the board for Manly and getting them in amongst the finals setup. I don't know. That's just a rogue idea. Whereas I was always historically, you know, along the lines of yourself there of like, no, he's just a fullback. He's your best fullback. You got to play him where he plays. And it's the club's responsibility to get the hamstrings right. They've got to figure out a way of getting him on the park and getting him fit and getting him well, because there's just no other situations that I've heard that you can say, well, this person had to retire because of recurrent hamstring injuries, apart from, you know, the reserve grade footballer who's in their mid-40s, who's got the bung hemis, which is a completely different ballgame to a bloke who's at the tippity top of the NRL world. From a draft point of view, would I buy Tolutau Koula? I'd have a think about it. I think with the AC joint, it might pause me a little bit. I think Garrick's probably a safer of the two, but he's an interesting prospect. If he's getting an extended run at fullback, I think his floor is pretty safe. I think he's got some attacking upside there, obviously. He looked pretty good against the Broncos, so maybe if you're a team sitting pretty, if you could offer someone, you know, sideways or down to Koula, I don't mind that as an idea. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm not like, I wouldn't overpay effectively. Like, I think he's what would you say? Probably like a low end CTW2, high end CTW3 for me, probably is where I'd value him. So in a 10-team league, that's a ranking, anywhere from the 15th, 16th best to, 24th, 25th best CTW. I just think centre wing is a position where there's so many good options that he probably still doesn't have enough for me to, say put him into a top 10. So if you can buy him for that price, if you can get him for around that, what you would value a 15th to 20th CTW, if you can get him for that price or cheaper, I don't mind it. But I wouldn't pay like CTW1 kind of prices personally.
Yeah. I think a good comparison would be like Steve Crichton off the top of my head straight up. I think that would be a trade I'd probably hit if I was getting Koula in that transaction, but something along those lines. Like, you're not talking tippity top there. Crichton's been a little bit down in terms of, I guess, points that he's been scoring of late there as well, playing in the centres at the Bulldogs. Anything else to add there, Brian? Because otherwise we can move on to question 2.
No, let's roll on.
All right, let's roll on. So question number 2 is about the Matty Johns show. They had a big chat about syndesmosis injuries, which was pretty funny, really, to watch. And I know you're probably sitting there tearing your hair out, whereas I found it quite hilarious to listen to them. Hindy tried to give it a description of, anatomical things and what was going on there in good show. So I guess the question here is about what is the simplest explanation that you can give about this for the Patreon they're asking the question.
Yeah, this almost felt like a personal attack, James. All the work that I've done over the syndesmosis in the past to kind of educate, because it's just my bugbear. Like, look, I'm not saying it's a major thing here, but certainly the way that syndesmosis is used in the game, can give me some frustration. And like, to be fair, I put it out there on Insta and Twitter, just so it kind of posted it. And the number of physios who actually replied to the story or to the post being like, oh man, I was losing my mind. So it was good to hear it wasn't just me. But I think, look, the important thing here is, what is syndesmosis? What is it? You hear it said all the time on the telecast, talking about an ankle injury specifically. So look, there's plenty of confusion on this week in and week out. It's not just on the Matty Johns show. We see it, and we see it incorrectly used all the time. So I want to keep it as simple as possible to just make it very, very clear. Syndesmosis is a body part. It's not the name of an injury or a condition. So you can't suffer syndesmosis, just like you can't suffer knee or you can't suffer ankle. Your syndesmosis is a body part, just like your knee is a body part or your ankle is a body part. So the syndesmosis is the name of the joint where your two shin bones meet at the top of the ankle. So right down, right above the ankle, and the ligaments that attach in and around that area. So I think people ask, where did it come from? Why is it all of a sudden popular? I think with improving media coverage, that's kind of been a big thing. You've got media journos with access directly to medical staff these days. So rather than just talking to coaches or to players, where it would have just been called an ankle sprain in the past. But the other thing is that it's an injury that's becoming more common. I think with the changing tackle techniques, we're seeing, players get their feet caught up in positions that they wouldn't have 20, 30 years ago. And also the boots are a lot grippier. They get stuck in the turf a lot more. And that does lend towards syndesmosis type injuries. Whereas in the past, it would slip, it would slide. Now it grips and twists. And that's where the syndesmosis injury comes in. The more common ankle sprain that people out there listening will have suffered is that lateral ligament injury, the low ankle sprain. So that's the one that Jack Bird suffered, for example, where the foot rolls in and stretches the ligaments on the outside. It is much easier in general to return from these quickly. In a sport like the NRL, they generally strap it up really well, often inject, an anti-inflammatory in there to settle it down pretty quickly, and guys can come back really well. But the thing with the syndesmosis, where those shin bones attach into each other above the ankle, the syndesmotic ligaments work to hold those two bones together, because as you run and the forces come down, those two bones want to split on either side of your ankle bone. So it means that rehab for damage to these ligaments is quite significantly more painful than that low ankle sprain. So longer recovery times. And then to address what Heine said, it doesn't always need surgery. So if you have a syndesmosis injury, it doesn't mean it needs surgery. But surgery has become more common with some new techniques. You'll hear me talk about the tightrope technique, which has come in, which shortens recovery time quite significantly. But I think to summarize, the syndesmosis is a body part. It's your high ankle. It's the ligaments and the bones above your ankle. You can injure your syndesmosis. You can have different severities of injury to your syndesmosis. So you can have a minor sprain. You can have a partial tear. You can have a complete tear of your syndesmosis. But yeah, you cannot suffer a really bad case of syndesmosis or be struck down with syndesmosis because, yeah, it's at the end of the day, it is the name of anatomy. How did I go, James?
Yep, good. No other points to add for me. I think you've ticked all the KPIs there, Brian. So I'm sure we'll hear it come up from time to time. We'll giggle along to it as well. But that's a really good explanation for everyone listening out there. Last question from Patreon here, Brian, is about Lockie Croker. And I guess he's been away for 3 weeks now. But it sounds like he's dealing with an inner ear concern. So could this be related to concussion, or is it more, I guess, not a central positional vertigo? Is it a peripheral positional vertigo? What are we reading in here through the tea leaves, Brian, about Lockie Croker, what he might be dealing with from an inner ear point of view?
Yes, this is really interesting because Manly initially came out and said that it was his neck. It was a neck not related to the concussion, but now they've kind of clarified that it's his inner ear. So look, we obviously don't have the ins and outs, but more than likely when it's inner ear, it's going to be vertigo, which is, for people who don't know what vertigo is, it's just dizziness effectively. Like and specifically in the inner ear, it's what we call, what will simplify it as positional vertigo. So in other words, he might roll to the left and start to get spins, or he might, hop up from lying down and start to get spins. It'll be certain positions that he puts himself in and specifically puts his head in that causes that spinning. So I think what's really interesting here is that when you suffer concussion, it can actually cause like damage or disruption to the vestibular system overall. And that can be through the nerves. It can be through the inner ear. So you can have central dizziness. So dizziness is coming from the brain, effectively, directly from the brain. But you can also have it, and probably more commonly where it comes from outside of concussion is from the inner ear. So some pretty important stats. So 85 to 90% of post-concussive dizziness goes away in 3 weeks. And if it hasn't within 3 weeks, which it hasn't for Croker, then it often is the BPPV, which we talk about, which is the inner ear. So effectively what this is, it's a buildup of small crystals in your ear canal. So the way I explain it to patients, it's like when you spin around in circles and then you stop and you still you're still a bit dizzy. You can't walk in a straight line. That's because when you spin around in those little semicircular canals in your inner ear, the fluid spins around as you spin around. And even though you stop, that fluid still can keep moving. And that's why it can kind of throw you off a little bit, because that fluid, it's almost like you spin it around in a cup and then you stop the cup. The water is still going to be spinning in that cup. And so what can happen is you can get a blockage in those semicircular canals. So then when you go to move, the fluid isn't moving as well. And so you can get that that dizziness. So there's some specific physio treatments you can do, and it's kind of a positioning of the head, lying back and lying one way, rolling to the other way. So it is like a bit of repositioning kind of treatment that can be done, but it can take up to 2 to 3 months to come good. So yeah, like I think I didn't want to dive too deep into, central versus peripheral and stuff like that, because we could do a whole podcast on it, because they've said that they have identified that it's in your ear. But effectively, I think here, like what Seibold said was he could be back next week. He could be back in a couple of months. That rings true, because we're dealing with the inner ear. It's not, once again, it's not a hamstring that you can scan and go, oh yeah, that's a grade 2. It's going to be 4 to 6 weeks. This is, okay, yeah, a lot more unpredictable. I mean, you working in the hospital system, mate, you'd have a lot more access to these kind of cases after car accidents and those kind of things. Do you see much of this?
Yeah, this is stretching my knowledge, to be fair, Brian. I don't think I've seen anyone with positional vertigo probably since like 2018 or 2019. So I guess in what I can recall, because I've got dad brain since that ×2, so I don't remember much these days. But I guess there's, I guess, two different approaches with positional vertigo. So there's what they call like canal lithosis, which is where the crystals within your ear canal sort of settle somewhere differently, and that gives you, faulty input to your balance system. And that's the thing that they do repositioning techniques with, but they do them, fairly slowly, and they sort of take you through certain positions to reconfigure where those, I guess, crystals sit. And then the other one is like a capsulolithosis, which is more common in like trauma, motor vehicle accidents, concussion stuff, I suppose, is where the crystals get adhered to like the cupula, which is the thing that sort of moves side to side in response to the endolymph fluid as well. So those, I guess, treatment approaches when you've got a capsulolithosis are more commonly like high intensity, faster is what they
Velocity,
need to
yeah.
be. Whereas, velocity, exactly, good point. So it's just a slightly different tweak on what you need to do depending on what your assessment finds, because your assessment's the thing that guides you into, is this a canal lithosis, is this a capsulolithosis? Commonly you need to assess them with like the specific goggles that you need to wear, so you can look at when you put their head in certain positions, what type of positional nystagmus they give, what symptoms do they get with it, all those sort of other things that come along with it. So I guess in Lockie Croker's situation, if he's had, a big acceleration deceleration thing, it could be, an insult to that system as well, which has given him lingering dizziness symptoms as well. But if it's a peripheral positional vertigo, they're very treatable. So I think that's the really good thing in his favor, is it is treatable. It just really sucks for people that have to go through that, because you have to reposition things and to get things right, you have to take yourself into episodes of vertigo, which is not fun. Like, that is just about as grim as you can get. Imagine, like, I guess for people that never have experienced vertigo, probably a really good way to describe it is like, if you've had 20 to 25 standard drinks, you're on the tiles, you're really on struggle street where the room's not staying still and there's nothing you can do about it. You've got to ride it out. It's like that. It's just a horrendous time where you're still but the room's spinning, and you've got no way of alleviating that. It's a horrible place to be for those people that suffer, like the positional vertigo side of things. But I guess in the physio realm, there are people that specialize in that. So there's probably more so. There's a vestibular clinic at most of the tertiary hospitals, I think, Brien, to my memory. Most of them would have that covered. If you went sort of further regionally, there would be people that have that special skill as well, or people in private clinics have that
Yeah,
set
we
up
cover
too.
it. We cover it at our clinic. So
Yeah.
I would see probably maybe a case every 2 to 3 weeks. And we've got probably 3 or 4 physios at our clinic that can treat the straight BPPV. So so it's something, once you get a bit more complex, it's probably outside of our realm. But that straight inner ear, that that repositioning stuff, we like, usually I think there'd be most private practices that would have someone who can cover that for you.
Yeah, very true. And there are ones that present way more frequently as well. I guess like posterior canal lithosis, like they're very, very common. And I think when you look at the numbers, they say sort of like 90% of them are posterior canal. So a lot of the times you can make a fairly good assumption based on your examination and what you need to do. Very last one from Patreon, Brian, before we move on to Super Coach Corner, is about the origin squads and what do you reckon the series score prediction will be? I had a quick squiz at New South Wales squad. I don't know if Queensland's been named just yet. Has it been released to the public, or
Yeah,
is it
no,
just sort of
just got released as we were recording. So as expected, 1-7, I think. So Murray Taulagi over Selwyn is probably the only like little bit of a dicey one. Ruben Cotter, Ben Hunt, Lindsay Collins, starting front row. Jaden Sewer, Jeremiah Nanai, second row. Pat Carrigan-Lock, Harry Grant, Mofo, Hopgood, and Selwyn as the bench. And then Felice, my boy Felice Kafusi, Brendan Piakura, and Ezra Mam are the 18th, 19th, and 20th men. So
big name missing.
Yeah. So I think thoughts on the origin squads. I think I just don't understand why Billy Slater doesn't like Dave Fifita. I don't get it. Look, in Billy we trust. I think obviously I'll say once again, it's good to see with the squads picked that Queensland are going to be ranked underdogs. Really, the New South Wales have just picked probably some of the strongest players in the comp. I think Queensland need to be up against it for the entire series, picking, from the lowly number of guys that we have. So yeah, just really good to see the underdogs getting into it again as per usual. Get that out of the way. From the Queensland perspective, that's just my biggest one. I just don't understand. I don't get it. I like this whole thing of, I see all these reports of Fifita's had a mixed year. And I know SuperCoach scoring, I'm not basing this on SuperCoach scoring because SuperCoach scoring, doesn't tell everything. But yeah, like Fifita's just looks so good. He's looked so good when he's been on the field. I think like defensively maybe, but then I can't say Jaden Sewer's been the most defensive, minded second rower that I've seen. On the Dragons have been getting rolled every second week. They lost by 40, on the weekend. So I wouldn't say he's in a team that's absolutely killing it, and I can understand why. So yeah, obviously Fifita does something that Billy doesn't like, because he played all 3 games last year, but it was even like the year before when he was killing it. Billy didn't pick him. So there's something in Fifita's game that he doesn't like. And I mean, look, Billy's got it wrong. Got it right more often than he's got it wrong. So once again, in Billy we trust. But yeah, to not even be in a 20-man, and even from that like 18th, 19th, 20th, so you got Felice, Piakura, and Ezra Mam. Like, who's your 18th man there? Like, I would think an 18th man, like maybe it's Ezra, but I would think an 18th would have a little bit more like versatility, maybe. I'm not really sure. They're probably, I'm picking at hairs there. But otherwise, yeah, keen to see. I think Selman on the bench is a bit of a weird one, but I think you'll talk about that a little bit more. And then the New South Wales team, I just don't understand. Like, my 2 big ones, Latrell. I think Latrell is someone as a Queenslander who freaks me the hell out whenever he's in the side, especially at center, because he's not required to, he's not relied on to do that big work from fullback, even though he doesn't do that week in and week out. But there's not that expectation there. He can just kind of, when he needs to, and he's just destroyed us in the past. So I just can't believe they haven't picked him when he made himself available. And then Teddy, I love Dylan Edwards. I think Dylan Edwards, and this is coming from someone who bought Dylan Edwards in SuperCoach a couple of weeks ago, so you could say there's a bit of SuperCoach bias there. But I just think Teddy's been in the best form he's been in for like the last 3 or 4 years. And he's been dropped. That shocks me with the, a lot of new combos, a lot of guys coming in. You've got Suoli'i and Zach Lomax on one edge, and then not having Teddy there. I think that was a surprise, but probably the big one for me, Latrell. Series score prediction, I'll go Queensland 2-1. I think that Queensland can get it done as rank underdogs. James should be paying probably $6, I reckon, in a 2-horse race. But I reckon they can get it done 2-1. Hit me with your takes.
I agree with your underdog prediction there. So we are massive outsiders for this first game, but it will be Queensland 3-0 if going off these teams that have been selected. So we'll start with Queensland. Not too many sort of weird ones there. Like I think Taulagi or Cobbo, you could make an argument either way in that one, and I don't think there's a big difference between there. I think Xavier Coates earns his spot. But in saying that, I don't understand the Coates versus Taulagi dynamic, where Coates has been the best left winger for the Storm, and then they're going to pick Taulagi on the left wing. Cobbo's historically played right wing at the Broncos. So my thinking would be Coates on the left, Cobbo on the right, Taulagi misses out. That would just be my take on things, because really, if they line up like they did last year, Hammer's going to play left centre, Val's going to play right centre. So you don't even have the Taulagi-Val combo on the left side either to lean on. And I guess you could say, well, Taulagi and Hammer have played Cowboys together, so maybe that's enough. I can understand that. But I wouldn't say that Taulagi gives you a huge amount of extra work rate. It gives you a little bit, but maybe not too much more than Coates or Cobbo, respectively. And Cobbo just does freak stuff that just... He's already done it in Origin series already, especially, those games outside the one he got concussed. So I don't really understand that. The Fifita one's a head scratcher, Brien. At least he's in your best 17. You can't tell me that he's going worse than Jade Sewer. You can't tell me he's going worse than Jeremiah Nanai either. Or you can't tell me he's not worth a spot in the top 17, where Billy's better have a damn good plan for Selwyn Cobbo at 17, because if there's no backline injuries, where does he play him? Where does he fit in? I don't understand that at all. Like, if there's no backline injuries, are you going to play Cobbo in the middle for 20 minutes? I just don't think that's a feasibly realistic thing either. I don't see him as that sort of player. I don't think he can give you that impact. Where Fifita can cover you, if he plays 17, he could play centre at a pinch. I think he could
did,
line up
James.
against.
He did. Him and Hunt were our centres last year.
Totally.
They survived.
Yeah, totally. And I think he can do that at a pinch. Like, it's not ideal, of course not, but I think he can cover a spot there that and give you more punch on an edge or a middle, and he just gives you more attacking upside than anyone else, which I think you have to have at Origin level. I don't know. I don't understand the missing piece there. I think the rest of it picks itself. I don't have too many qualms. I think Hopgood's deserved his spot. He's been immense for the Parry Eels. He was close last year. He deserves it this year. For the Blues, I couldn't agree more about Latrell. He's just rinsed us every year he's played us. He hasn't lost a series as a Blue. And I don't know what is doing there or what's missing there. You can't tell me, though, if he were Queensland eligible, Queensland wouldn't find a way to get him in their team. There's no way Latrell Mitchell type talent like they have treated Latrell in New South Wales. I think that's very obvious for all to see. And if he's going to play centre, that's perfect, because you got Zach Lomax, you got Brian Toto and Dylan Edwards, who carry the ball all the time. So he's perfect there. He doesn't have to do the dirty work. He just gets on the end of back lines there. He's got Luai inside him. He's going to give him good pill. I don't really understand him missing there. I think he's a massive, massive, massive upgrade over Suoli'i, because I'm assuming Crichton's going to play left centre. Suoli'i will play right centre. If Suoli'i's playing right centre on Hammer, I love that for Queensland. Whereas I guess my option would have been you play Latrell left centre, he gets Val. That's a good matchup for New South Wales. You play Crichton at right centre, he neutralises Hammer. That's a good matchup for New South Wales. I think they really missed a trick there that they could have really done us in with centre matchups a little bit more effectively. I think the other ones I don't really understand would be like your Huddy Young sort of selections. I think Keon Kolomatangi gives you a bit more through the middle than a Hudson Young potentially, and Keon can play edge and middle. I think he's got a bit more versatility. I don't understand Olakwatu not starting as well. He's an 80-minute player for Manly. Surely he goes 80 at Origin level. I'm not really too sure about that. Matty Burton, if he's not in the top 17, I'm not here. He's been unreal. He's positionally versatile. He's got to be in your 17, at least as a bench cover, if you're not going to play a second hooker off the bench as well. So you've got to either get Robson, 80 minutes. You don't really have a backup plan there unless McInnes can play minutes through the middle. But then you can play McInnes at 13 when Isaiah Yeo's been your best 13. I don't know. Like, that's a head scratcher for me as well. The Nicho one's a little bit of a risk, but I don't mind it. I think it's game one, so I think if you're willing to take the risk there, that's fine. It's not a must win, so you take the risk. I do agree about Teddy as well. He would probably have been my pick, but that's not a big difference. I think him and Edwards are not that dissimilar, so I don't mind that as a Teddy v Edwards sort of type thing. The ones one guy I thought he was unlucky to miss out was Max King. I thought he's just been immense for the Bulldogs. He's been big minutes. He does the dirty stuff. He gets north-south. I really like what Max King's about. And I thought he might have been in and around that team a little bit more than some of the other players there. I guess on Jake Trbojevic and Cam McInnes and Hudson Young and Reece Robson, I guess everyone's like, oh, they're real Origin players. Like, they've got that sort of Queensland DNA in them. But I think the Queensland DNA and the New South Wales DNA is not the same, Brian. Like, the guys that we pick, it has been shown historically it does not work for New South Wales. Like, New South Wales, their MO is get the big dogs in, get arrogant, get your hoss out, and
Throbbers.
get throbbers in your team and get arrogant. Like, that is your MO. Like, that is when the Blues are by far at their best. You don't get these guys who, are solid, who are workmanlike, who are blue collar, to use that expression. Like, that's just not their go. Like, New South Wales, when they're throbbing, that's when they're unbeatable. Like, when they're just like, we're a team full of throbbers, suck on it. Like, we're going to just come in and roll you guys here. Whereas Queensland are always like, we don't have the depth. So we get these guys who just workmanlike, who do their role, who get out of the way when the backline wants the ball, is basically how they've operated. Even when we had like the 8-in-a-row team, like, we didn't have elite forwards in comparison to New South Wales, but we had
Tim
guys
Glasby, mate.
would do the work and then they'd get out of the way. Like, they just wouldn't get in the way of the backline. Like, whereas New South Wales, when they didn't have those, they had those workmanlike guys like Paul Gallons, like, they would just get in the way all the time. Like, the backline would never get good ball. They'd sort of get in each other's way. I don't understand this. We need to get origin types in there. Madge has shown his hand last year when he picked the not the All Blacks, God, the Kiwis team last year. 3 forwards on the bench with he had New Brown on the bench last year with Kieran Foran when they got when they rolled Australia 30-0. And interestingly, he had Chance at fullback. So he likes, I guess, the busy types at fullback. I think he had Isako and Militalo on the wings, who probably not the biggest ball carriers, but they're probably got a bit more about them there. So there is that MO that he probably wants meters from his back three. But I don't understand, no interchange hooker. It'll be very interesting to see how Queensland shapes up because the Grant Hunt thing just works so well for Queensland and it's so safe. And Hunt gives you minutes in the middle if you need him to. Like, he's just such a good player. When he puts on that maroon jersey, he's just such a jet. So I'm looking forward to it, Brian, because there's so much to talk about. And boy, oh boy, whoever loses game one on the back of these selections is going to be under pressure. Even Billy. I think if Billy stuffs this game up or if Cobbo's not utilised in a certain way, if Queensland are found wanting down in Sydney and they're really embarrassed, that could be really, 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 really problematic for Billy to get them back on track for Melbourne game 2 and then obviously Suncorp in game 3. So heaps to unpack there. It'll be in the news cycle 24/7. Can't wait. It's going to be good.
Love it, mate. Origin time. How good. Let's roll through to Supercoach. So we've been keeping people into it for long enough now. So, mate, you've dusted me. You're the better bloke. Hit me with your trades for this week, what you scored, and then what are your plans, the big buy coming up? I would say just quietly that this next week is easy to cover, and it's round 14. That's the more challenging one.
Yeah, mine's going to be round 16, I think, by the look of things. I think for this one and 14, I'm pretty good. So score, Brian, is 1176. Not huge score, but I dodged a massive bullet. So I had the captain on Nicho, but I looped drinking instead. So if I captained Nicho, I was staring down the barrel of probably sub 1,000, I reckon. I would have been in all sorts of trouble. So I got pretty lucky there. So I'll take the good with the bad there. I got lucky. I traded in Isaac Tungo, Nick Meaney at centre wing this week to beef that up. I was tossing up Eli Katoa and Zach Lomax. So when Lomax got named, I was like, well, not the worst thing because he's going to miss a heap of time in Origin. And I was off Meaney because you brought him in earlier in the year, Brian. And I was initially like, I can't bring him in if Patch is going to come back and goal kick, but that's just not going to happen anymore. So I'm much happier to bring Nick Meaney in at centre wing. He's dual eligible and he's going to kick goals. So I'm pretty happy with that. No trades for me this week, I don't reckon. I've got 15 for round 13, so I'm not going to burn any. That's the first time I've burned any trades. So better late than never, I guess, for yours truly on that front. Round 4 targets. So Latrell Mitchell missing Origin, he just becomes target number 1 for me at fullback. I think if I can get Fuller to him without too much of a gap, I've got 750 in the bank, so I should make it regardless. But maybe someone else on top of that. The other one's Samuel Finu, or if Latrell's not really on my radar, maybe Jareem Buller. He'll play every game between round 14 and round 21. He's not an elite scorer at the present, but he was better last year. I think with the Tigers not missing anyone to Origin, you can make an argument they might go okay through that period. And Buller, he's got a good passing game. He's got a good base sort of game for his runs. I don't think he's the worst shout in the world. He's not a sexy pick, but I think he could be one that you could plug in at fullback and just get week in, week out production out of. So he's one on my radar. He might be straight across from Trey Fuller as well. So you might be able to go Fuller to Buller with minimal money difference, which would be incredible to think about, really, when you get Fuller from bottom dollar. The other people would be Greg Margie, Eli Katoa, and Britt Nickera in round 14. And then the Finns boys in round 15, Brian, I think Asako, Herbie, or Ewan Aiken. I think you got to look at Finns boys there. Probably Maxi Plath is in and amongst it too. They become really attractive for me in round 15 as trade-in options for the rest of the way through there to cover, especially 16 and 19. They're really tricky ones as it stands for me to cover. So that's how I'm shaping up with things, Brian, as it goes there. I don't know if I'll move up or down with a score like that. I feel like I'll probably still move down because I was playing someone in head-to-head who captained Nicho, and they still beat me in terms of their score. So there's a lot of big scores floating out there this week amongst teams. So I don't know if I'll get green arrows or not. Don't know how to feel about it, to be fair. How'd you travel?
Yeah, mate. I was just checking. We just got updates through, so I got an extra 6 points. Maxi Plath went up to 62, I think. So he was a good. He's been a good solid buy for me. 11.26. I think I'll definitely go down. I'm up at about 1,000th or pretty close to it after a big week last week. So I'm expecting big drops because a lot of the leagues I'm in, there's like 1,300 plus. I'm seeing a lot of because there were some big scores. Like I didn't have Val, I didn't have our boy Kiraz, unfortunately, but I'll mention that again. Holy moly, James. How good is Kiraz going? How good? I own him in quite a few drafts. I did trade for him in a couple. I didn't get him in too many drafts to start with, but he's real quiet. And I traded for him in 2 of my 6 leagues. So I now have him in 4, I think. And I'm just like, yeah.
Good exposure.
Very good exposure. Loving life. So that is brilliant. I brought in Wishart and Dylan Brown in my halves for SJ and Fini Fuiaki. I'm pretty happy with that. I was a bit off trading SJ last week, but it was the only way I could kind of make Dylan Brown work to get the cash. So I've got 15 for next week, so I'm pretty sorted. I always like if you're looking to trade this week, just look at the upside guys for this week. Are there any blowout games? I remember we brought in KP last week as like it was our first buy round. He missed out on Origin and he was like the shining light of like this could be huge. And it just worked out so well for us. So I think like your Teddy, Sam Walker, I think the Roosters game is the one that could be a real blowout. So I don't mind Teddy or Sam Walker, but you just got to look out for round 14 because I've already got I would make that trade, but I've just got so many Roosters already and Finns, so I just don't want to be short there. The only trade I'm tossing up is Lomax to Armstrong just for numbers for 14 and then 19 because 19 is pretty short for me as well, and I assume Lomax is looking, and Armstrong's just at that price. KP could be back by around 19 potentially, so it's a bit of a risk. But yeah, just to get some cash because then the next week, that's when I want to look at like my trade targets, Latrell, or like Dave Fifita because he's missed out on Origin. Oh. And mate,
he's must have now, I reckon. Like he's got to get like if he's not playing Origin.
Mate, I tell you what, and the best thing about this, right, is that we're going to be able to make this decision after Origin 1 because Origin 1 is going to be on the Wednesday and you're not going to have to make that decision till Friday. Mate, if Queensland win, I'm blowing apart my team to bring in Fifita because he's not going to play for the rest of the series if they win game 1 because Billy will, stick true with the guys that he's got. So I will just be like hammering Dave Fifita into my side hard. Or if Queensland lose game 1, then I might pivot to like an Eli Katoa potentially. But yeah, I definitely want Latrell, and I think, I'm still tossing up whether that means a Scotty Drinkwater out or a Dylan Edwards out. I think that'll be dependent on if Edwards is looking like he's going to back up because he's just killing it. I mean, I bought him hoping that he missed Origin, but he didn't. But he's putting up 120 points a week. Just no issues. So I'm pretty happy to kind of hold him if I can, even with him playing Origin. But yeah, that's one. And then, I think Fifita, Eli Katoa. But yeah, if Queensland win game 1, my advice from a Supercoach perspective, anyone out there is buy Dave Fifita without fail. And then just keep an eye out for Ronaldo Mulatalo because I think he's into the 500,000s, which for a guy on the left wing of the Sharks, they've had some rough games. They've got some good games coming up, pending Nicho's availability. And then Scotty Sorensen, he's back now. He played 69 minutes, I think, on the weekend. If he gets an 80-minute roll back, he's mid-500s and could, he could absolutely go bonkers. He averaged, I think, about 70 last year, so could be a sneaky buy there too. I think that's about it, James. You got anything more to add, or are we just gearing up for...
I don't think so. I think getting Fifita in is the call, Brian. Like, I'm pretty lucky. I'm sitting pretty good with, like, I got 750 in the bank, so I could go probably, like, Joe Chan up to Fifita, which would just make my absolute dreams come true, to be honest. But yeah, sad for us not seeing him in a maroon jersey, but if we can get him in the Supercoach setups, not a bad consolation. I don't know what his ownership's at. Is he still about sub 10% or is he a bit higher than that now?
I haven't looked. I literally hung off him because I was like,
so did I.
He's going to be picked for Origin. He's not going to play many games. And now here we are. And I think, I think Titans play around 16 and 19, pretty sure.
Yeah, I think they do.
Yep.
He's only 11% owned. God, that's going to skyrocket, isn't it? 887. So he's up there. but I can get there as it stands at the moment, and I think I'm just gonna. That might even mean I do like a Jareem Buller across from Fuller. Might be Fuller to Buller, and then get Fifita up for what it costs. That might be a better go than Latrell and Katoa. Like I
I
don't
think
know.
I might be
He's gonna
doing
tear in
I
his
might be
own.
doing Lomax to Armstrong on the back of this conversation.
Mm.
Just I don't even really need it this week, but just to get some cash.
Yeah,
Bank the cash up to get Fifita in round 14.
yeah. Shout. Good
Cool.
shout.
All right, sorted, mate. As always, make the decisions on Sunday night and then never change. That's the Brains Trust. But that's a wrap for this week, guys. If you like the pod, give us a review, recommend to a friend. If you want more info, patreon.com/NRL Physio. But otherwise, James, have a good week. We hopefully next week will be a very quick pod because we'll have very limited games to talk about. But have a good week, mate. It's Origin season. How good up Queensland. I'll actually change. I'll change my sign out tonight because we're in Origin season. But yeah, mate, I'm just keen. I love Origin time.
Yeah, it's the best 3 nights of the year, in my opinion. Apart from Magic Round, Dad Schoolies is obviously up there, but Origin's a very, very close second. We all get behind it for the state of Queensland. And in Billy we trust. I know we just ragged out his team selections, but tell you what, he did all the right things last year, so we can't be too critical there.
Mate, I love it. Guys, talk to you next week. Up the mighty Redcliffe Dolphins and the mighty Queensland Maroons.